Won't let me plant sunflowers? Fine. Story happened a couple of years ago, but it's my favorite lawyer story and I hope you enjoy. None of the following is legal advice. Don't take legal advice from randos on the internet. TLDR. Client gets to plant sunflowers. Client walks into the office and asks us for a contract review. He then hands over an HOA contract. Before slogging through a whole HOA contract, I asked him what he was hoping to accomplish. They want me to dig up my sunflowers. Your sunflowers? Yes, I planted a row of sunflowers outside my house. They pranced by and said that sunflowers are not allowed per the contract I signed. So, I want you to tell me if that is true or not. Sir, before anything else I need to tell you that this will likely be an hourly fee bill. HOAs are notorious for dragging things out, so, these could quickly become expensive sunflowers. I don't care. This is America and I should be able to plant sunflowers, god damn it. Still thinking he wasn't that serious about sunflowers, I asked for a 3-hour retainer. He immediately pulled out a checkbook and paid for 4 hours, so, I buckled down to review the alleged anti-sunflower clause. Just for reference, the sunflowers he wanted to plant were really big, 5 feet, and all along the front of the house. It was a very substantial number of sunflowers. The contract did indeed contain a clause, with a very thorough list, on which plants were and were not allowed to be planted. The list had just about every plant I could think of, in alphabetical order, think apple, banana, cauliflower, dill. Sunflowers included. Corn was not included, which becomes very important later. Quick legal point. If you write no dogs allowed, it is normally assumed that you are talking about all dogs generally. If you write no labs, golden retrievers, or poodles allowed, it is normally assumed that all other dogs are allowed. Sometimes a not great attorney will write a super long list to pad hours, read, charge more, instead of just writing no plants without prior approval or something. I called the client back in for the bad news. In explaining the above legal point, I let him know that the HOA got a raw deal from whoever drafted the contract. No can do on the sunflowers. But if it makes you feel any better, they were probably overbilled by whoever wrote this contract. Pretty shoddy work too. They even forgot to write down corn, but they included nonsense like dragon fruit. So yes to corn, no to sunflowers. I didn't really check the contract for corn, but it's not prohibited in the plant section, so probably. Excellent. That'll work. I thought he was oddly happy with bad news. Then 2 or 3 weeks later he came in with a picture of his house, surrounded by huge sunflowers. What happened? This guy drove out to the country and bought obnoxiously large and ugly corn stalks. He promptly planted them where the sunflowers had been. When confronted by the HOA he told them, paraphrasing, to suck it, the contract lets me plant corn. Then after some negotiation he agreed to take the corn down, in exchange for permission to plant sunflowers. Now we are friends. He is still a great client, and he lives surrounded by a ridiculous moat of sunflowers.
Now to the comments. It's also usually an end to a HOA fight if you go with something like I was going to spend my hobby time on, thing I actually want that they declined, but my second choice will be installing a large ham radio tower that you can't argue against due to the FCC's emergency broadcasting regulations. FYI.
OP replied. I did not know about that, thanks, today I learned.
Redditors helping Redditors. Makes the cockles of your heart glow. Ah yes, the put something worse so you get the thing you want. I'd love to see a community with gardens out front. It's be better than just grass and they can do a food swap after harvest.
OP replied. If you want a kitten, start by asking for a pony, laughing.
So that's why my parents never got me that puppy. That guy's got a good head on his shoulders. He also consulted the right lawyer. Great story.
OP replied. I'm glad you enjoyed. Thanks for the compliment.
The insight of lawyers padding their contracts makes me excited to read contracts and see what I can do. Thanks for that. Either this guy has duck you money, or he's just had enough of being trampled on, and he's by God gonna have his way on one thing.
OP replied. ¿Por qué no los dos?
Could be. HOAs are a deal breaker for me. If I buy a house, I want to be able to make my own choices about my own property. WTF.
OP replied. Yeah, in my experience they vary from not noticed to small hill for a small king.
King of the castle, king of the castle. I have a chair, I have a chair. Go do this, king of the castle. Excellent. This is lawyering, and clienting, done right?
OP replied. I'm glad you liked it and I appreciate the compliment.
Should have told the HOA to shuck it instead of suck it.
OP replied. Dang, a real missed opportunity.
Good malicious compliance, but I mostly upvoted for moat of sunflowers. Good job doing your lawyer thing.
Bees are a major pollinator of sunflowers, therefore, growing sunflowers goes hand in hand with installing and managing beehives, particularly in agricultural areas where sunflowers are crops. In fact, bee honey from these areas is commonly known as sunflower honey due to its sunflower taste.
Due to its sunflower taste. Crunchy and makes your gums bleed. I planned something similar for my HOA but then learned it was actually one of the good ones that's laid back and is only there to make sure no one keeps a junkyard in their yard. For example, I was having a hot tub put in and the rules said I had to have a living fence around it. Okay, not unreasonable. Heard from a neighbor a story about problems getting a project of his approved, so I was concerned. Did some research and learned they had defined fence in the rules as an enclosed structure. Only 3 to 4 feet tall fences are allowed, 6 feet are not, but the county does allow that. So, I was very prepared to install random 6 feet tall fencing panels in a manner to look as ugly as possible without creating an enclosure and therefore not meet the definition of a fence by the HOA. Luckily it turned out they approved my project plans without issue, and made a couple suggestions that I had not thought of that I like, so it was a non-issue.
They probably need to improve their rules regarding bodies of water 3 or deeper. This is to ensure the safety of their loved ones and guests.
Not ridiculous, a satisfying moat of sunflowers.
OP replied. Can we settle on an eyebrow-raising moat of sunflowers?
Does that come under the overtime clause? I love it that sunflowers was the hill he chose to die on. Thank you for helping him troll his HOA.
OP replied. Sunflowers. Tonight we dine in hell.
This only works with dinner plate sunflowers. I would love to hear the farmer's story. I can imagine a very angry man coming to your farm to buy corn. You ask him how many ears. He tells you he wants plants. You explain the plants aren't for sale. He writes a check that shows they are for sale. You dig them up and help him put them in his SUV and wave goodbye.
OP replied. I need corn, lots of corn.
My neighborhood doesn't have an HOA. We do have CCRs, but, without the HOA, they really aren't enforceable. The other day, it occurred to me that, it might be a good idea to investigate establishing an HOA, but not just any HOA, because I think HOAs are a terrible idea. The main purpose of my HOA would be to make sure that no one else can establish an HOA. My HOA would have dues. Probably $1/month. Or you could pay annually and get a discount. Say $10/year. My HOA would have fines for violations of the CCRs and non-payment of dues, 25 cents per month that the violation goes unremedied or the dues go unpaid. In order to be implemented, my HOA would require an 80% majority of the residents to approve it in a vote. The main reason for this is that, then a clause of my HOA would be that it requires an 80% majority to abolish the HOA or amend the HOA rules. My HOA would limit any increases in the HOA dues to $1/month each year. So, if someone can get 80% of residents to agree to increase dues, then they can go up by $1/month, but then another increase cannot be proposed for a year. Also, any monthly dues increases would have to be subject to the same percentage discount offered for annual payment. I'm trying to think of other rules and benefits my HOA would impose, but mostly it's just to keep anyone from putting a different HOA in place. I think my HOA would be very popular.
OP replied. I 100% approve.
My high school banned bikes, skateboards, roller skates, and roller blades on campus outside of the bike rack area. I learned to ride a unicycle and took it between classes. When confronted, I happily pointed out that all these other things were against the rules, but unicycles were not mentioned and they are fundamentally different from bicycles. I did not get in trouble. But they did amend the student handbook to also ban unicycles and all other wheeled transportation.
OP replied. Who doesn't love being the person who made them change the rules?